Hi, thank you for joining us on the Short Bus Debate Club. My name is Brian Courtney, and I am one of your hosts. The reason that we're doing this show is to give you a different angle on things that are happening now, things that have happened in the past. We want to show you where our stupidity has taken us. I mentioned that I am one of the hosts. My other host is Darren Jolly, and I'll let him do a quick introduction.
I'm Darren Jolly. We're gonna sit here and rattle off a bunch of nonsense to you all, kind of trying to think some things through, and I could say an unconventional way, but I think it's probably even outside of those spaces. I mean, most of the places where people look for their information right now is framed in some pretty, obnoxious, ridiculous, and very directed ways. You can pretty much see where the thoughts are coming, depending on where the money's flowing, who it is that's espousing them. We'll get into that stuff later, more deeper, but that's essentially what our intention is. Waste a lot of time trying to think things through better than most people are, and trying to find honest ways to create a concept of what moving forward actually would look like outside of what's being framed for us in these other spaces.
Yeah, and hopefully when we're doing it, we can not only entertain you a little bit, but, point you in the right direction, because I think that both of us would say, we don't want people to just parrot what it is we're saying. We want people to follow up, and if we talk about a link where they can read some information, that they go to that link and form their own opinion, because we don't need the opinions of whoever the fuck it is we're talking about. We don't need more Oprah Winfrey opinions. We don't need more Rachel Maddow or Bill Maher. We need people who understand how to form their own opinion. So that's kind of what the Short Bus Debate Club is all about.
Well, and we need to understand socially that if a person starts to give you an argument, like if you really listen to, like if you're familiar with the way that, say, Fox News constructs some sort of an argument, or MSNBC constructs an argument, or the BBC constructs an argument, you can generally tell within the first 20 seconds where that person's getting their information, because they're, again, like the parroting concept. You not parroting, parroting. When people are just like, how can you have critical thought about anything if everything that's coming out of everybody's mouth is just something that's being given to them in a frame? And don't get me wrong, like, these frames that are being presented are complicated, and as a society, we love narratives. We love a story. We love somebody for somebody to provide the page turning moment, to where, like, the way that our media is working is almost like it's almost like watching a movie sometimes. But we need to get out of the habit of fetishizing this desire for those frames, and start trying to find a way to create those spaces for ourselves, because this is a road to disaster the way that we're going right now.
Yeah, and on that happy note,
we are buckets of joy.
We are, like I said, gonna try to entertain you as well. Even though I do believe also that we're heading for disaster, but fuck it, we'll have a few laughs on the way. Some of the things that I want to talk about throughout not just this episode, but future episodes are, things like the recent Roe v. Wade decision. I would like to talk about the drug policy and the prison industrial complex, voting, just stuff that is going to continue to get us into trouble, and things that maybe we could change if we tried real hard. So that's kind of the intro as far as I'm concerned. I would also like to mention that we do want to hear from you guys. Um, whether it's a topic that you want to discuss or you want to tell us that we truly belong on a short bus, or you want to give us some kudos. Our number is 720-334-7655 or 720-334 roll, because we are on the short bus and we are rolling.
And just in case you didn't pick up the subtleness of this point, we're not trying to be insensitive to anybody, but we need some sarcasm, we need some satire, and we're not going to be real politically correct about some things when some of these things are discussed. I mean, sensitivity has a place, but when you're a society of lemmings running off of a cliff, I mean, we can sit here and talk about what a person wants to identify themselves as, but if we're not eating food, then we're just going to end up eating each other's fingers until we're all essentially done for. So again, that positivity is flowing, but I mean the point is just that, and again, not to be insensitive, but we have to understand that when we're talking about like the things that Brian was just talking about in terms of things that he wants to talk about. I mean, when you're talking about policies or you're talking about practices, institutions that we have like voting that we use as a mechanism to try to imagine creating a different world and doing certain things to create that world. We need to understand clearly how
those things work. I mean,
or don't work. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So, voting in the presidential election is great. And we're just so fucking happy that 65% of the people came out when Barack Obama was running for president. But then the numbers dropped during the midterms. And on the state level and the local level, nobody votes at all because they don't think it's important. Well, one of the reasons that Roe v. Wade was essentially reversed or given back to the state was because people don't vote. And so all of these zealots who use religion as a means when it's convenient for them have now written policy and are essentially going to take us back to the Stone Age. If you were a male and you went to the doctor because you had the clap and the doctor told you, sorry, you have to keep it, how happy would you be with that? And essentially we're talking about a medical procedure. And that's why I use the clap, because no man is going to be happy that they have to keep the clap. So
that was a double entendre, just for the record. You didn't even need to see it; it was all right there.
So I just think that it's messed up that since people aren't voting on the state level, that all of these people who, I don't know, maybe they think they can tell women what to do with their bodies because their dick is no bigger than a clit, or maybe they've never satisfied a woman, so they want to tell them what to do. In either case, there's some problems with what happened with Roe versus Wade, and I'm not saying that voting alone would change it, but voting in all of your elections would definitely help.
But no matter what, this is the deeper questions that we're trying to get involved in when we're thinking this through. Like we live in a system where we have this sort of rhetorical disposition that has such an affection for the concept of democracy, right? And I mean, to the point where like the weird rallies that would go on, at the end of Trump's presidency and whatnot. I'm not talking about just January 6th. We'll talk about it at some other point in time because there's so much of that. And the January 6th stuff is that's one of those MSNBC moments right now, and it's just so disingenuous the way that they approach all that stuff. And again, we'll get to that more later. But when we talk about in the concept of democracy as an institution, as a practice, uh, does participating in elections produce the responses that we're looking for? What are some other avenues? What are some other avenues that people have gone down in the past? In terms of trying to create these shifts. I mean, we are not, like I said, we're fringers in many respects, but I'm stereotypically somebody would identify me as a super lefty, and like Brian, as you know, we've grown up together, so we've known each other for a pretty long time. But he would generally, would you say it's fair that you sort of self-identified as sort of like a libertarian-ish in many respects?
Yeah, I think that that's fair, but I would say that I'm a Jeffersonian with environmental leanings.
It's complicated, right? So I mean, that's part of the, like, when I say that I'm like, when I say lefty, I mean, I was an academic who went to grad school a couple times and dropped out a couple of times. I read a lot of Marx. I read a lot of people that wrote a lot of stuff from the Marxist position. And uh, Brian and I mean, I've known him 13. I'm 47 now. Uh, we even through our disagreements throughout all this time, we tend to connect more, even though we come from such very different points, because the ways in which the conventional dispositions don't offer us good concrete solutions. We've tried to create our own ways or our own mechanisms throughout the course of our lives to try to, like, whether it was me through the academy, whether it was him when he the people propaganda stuff, when he wrote Off the Grid. I mean, Brian has had a billion projects that have always been aimed at trying to creatively imagine a way to sort of engage in social projects that piggyback on top of those conventional spaces in democratic institutions, but understand the weaknesses of them and try to find uh, ways out, ways forward, ways that aren't stuck in these left-right spectrum dispositions, and are recognize these common goals in very unconventional ways.
Yeah, I don't know if maybe it is unconventional. I don't know. The reason I discovered that I was more of a Republican than a Democrat was at the time, I had just turned 18. Clinton was running against Bush. Clinton wanted to take away our guns. Bush wanted to take away freedom of speech. And I figured, fuck it, I'm a Republican, because at least if they ever try to take away my freedom of speech again, I still got my guns. I ended up being a precinct leader for the Republican Party and realized that they are complete fucking psychos, and they're not the Republicans that were Republicans. Back, Republicans helped with Dred Scott. They were pivotal in Dred Scott and helping him win his court case. And now, if you are a different color than white, the Republicans aren't really shining on you. So I decided I really wasn't a Republican, not a Democrat, so libertarian made a lot of sense to me. Turns out that they weren't the greatest party either. They don't care about the environment because they just want everybody to have their own civil rights. And I'm good with that, except for the fact that we have to try to take care of each other to some degree, and the things around us, nature, trees, lakes. And I talked to one libertarian candidate, and he thought that it was a good idea to just privatize it, sell the national park to a corporation. And his argument was ownership. There's pride in ownership, and they'll take care of it. Well, I know a lot of people who own a lot of houses, a lot of cars, and they treat them like shit. So I don't like that argument. So maybe it was unconventional in how I decided my political leanings and ideology.
Well, but you even think about what you just said. I mean, like initially, like you outline where your traditional institutional connections were, but you spun into all these other spaces. I mean, like you said, I mean, most people would never try to be a precinct leader. I mean, but you saw some things you didn't like, you saw some problems, you try to engage that, you went to some meetings, and then you saw the writing on the wall. You moved away from that. um, like I said, there was a thing in libertarianism that you gravitated towards, but I mean,
Ironically, and it's really weird, but one of the reasons that I decided I wasn't a Republican was there was a woman who was running for state senate, and she decided that she was pro-life and that everybody, should be pro-life. And I thought, if there's a party where a woman is actually pro-life and trying to tell all of the other women in the world what to do with their bodies, I've got a problem with it. So there was more than just that, but that is kind of what steered me away.
I don't want to caricature or anything like that, but it is interesting how like we tend to sort of like go through these traditional institutional mechanisms in these spaces, and you know through so many different motions, like things fall to the wayside, and then these other creative spaces sort of like come to the I mean, your people's propaganda stuff. I mean, that was I mean, ambitious. I mean, and thoughtful. I mean, you were trying to track voting activity of uh, people in Congress at the state level and the federal level, which is, I mean, an incredible undertaking. It would have been one of those things that if you found somebody on the outside that would have funded it and you had some nice technical expertise, it would have been a lot easier. But you got on, I think you were on KBPI a couple of times, if I remember correctly.
I was on the radio, and I maybe have delusions of grandeur, but I
Cheers, brother.
kind of pulled out of the people's propaganda stuff just because I didn't think I was making the change that I was supposed to. And it's crazy because, I did get people to go and vote that didn't traditionally vote.
Because that was the intention, right? You were trying to provide that information and help get people stimulated to get
Yeah, I
involved in it.
wanted to inform and not steer them away. So, I broke down the legalese of referendums and amendments into something that could be understood by the layperson. Um, I tried to show people how the House and Senate were voting, at least on the federal level. On the state level, that was tougher to do. And
There's a lot going on. Like I said, that was an ambitious project.
I wanted to get judges' decisions, but they typically are not released to the public, so you can't even tell how a judge weighed one way or another, which is kind of fucked up because we have to vote for these people, every 2 years or every 10, depending on where you are in the country. And we don't even know what it is they stand for. So there's things like that I want to change. But yeah,
My ex-ish, her father, I won't mention any names, but before he passed away, he wanted to actually create a score system for judges to where you could see how they came down on certain things. It was the same kind of idea, but how do you do that? I mean,
you can't, because they don't release it because they want to get voted in again. So yeah, I mean,
don't you forget the most important thing that you created with people's propaganda, though, dude.
the
The
Delephant.
elephant, dude.
The Delephant was badass because they are all Demopublicans. That's something important, and I don't care if you vote Democrat or Republican, but I would just, recommend not voting a straight ticket just because of one thing or the other, because one group is going to try to fuck you and take your money and give it to a different group, and the other group is going to do the same thing. It's just who they give the money to.
Well, and two simple cases in point in relation to this. When Trump became the Republican nominee for president in 2016, I remember this advertisement that had Bush 1, Clinton, Bush 2, uh, and of course Hillary wasn't there because she was in opposition, but and Obama. These were that's four people that you couldn't get into a room together 10 years beforehand, or even 2 years beforehand at that point. I mean, the vitriol between, the neocons and the neolibs, because that's, I mean, in general terms, what you can essentially chalk up the upper echelons of those party positions as, I think, something we'll get into more down the line. But they did advertisement against Trump because of the way that their financial interests were being undermined by the right wing populist rhetorical disposition of what Trump was putting forward, which of course is ironic because he followed the line that, I mean, he didn't have any controversial populist legislation. I mean, it's just freaking hilarious to think about all the things that he said when he was running, and then of course the policies that he supported once he was in office. But the other thing, in relation to truly understanding the Demopublican concept is, and this one just, it's like fingernails on a chalkboard to me right now. Like Liz Cheney asking Democratic voters in Wyoming to recast their votes as Republicans so they can vote in the primary because they want to vote for somebody that's not pro-Trump. Liz Cheney is her father's daughter. I mean, she is a warmonger. I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. I'm not really excited about the military-industrial complex. Again, stuff that we'll get into a little bit more later on. But if you really believe that Liz Cheney is representative of your interest as a human being, then you're not the kind of human being that I want to associate with. So, but that's that whole Demopublican thing. Like it's this group that sits in the middle where they're protecting very specific economic interests. Follow the money, see what connects to it, and the political parties are essentially dominated by those dispositions.
Well, I would hope that just based on, the state of Wyoming and the population there, and I know that they're generally conservative, which is fine. But if you think Liz Cheney, who moved to Wyoming and ended up buying a big pad in Jackson Hole, you've got to realize that the rest of the population of Wyoming can't afford a big pad in Jackson Hole. So do you think that she's really looking out for you?
Are they from Wyoming originally, or
No, I think she's from Virginia.
you'd think East Coast somehow or another. I mean,
Yeah.
not to whatever East Coast, whatever. I'm not, blah 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 blah. But old money, I'm gonna stick everybody into a category and be a hypocrite now. So
Yes, indeed. Uh, I don't
so
know. She was educated at the University of Chicago.
what was her degree in?
Uh,
And is that graduate or undergrad?
well, she went to McLean High School in McLean, Virginia.
Okay, Virginia. There you go. Okay, you were right on that one.
I try.
I really have to be careful in offering Brian compliments like that because he's already running with enough on his own, And look, I'm guilty of the same thing in my own ways, but again, you'll get that picture as we move through the further episodes. So
Yeah. So and it's not just Liz Cheney. I mean, really think about who is running for whatever position, and think about where they come from and where they want to go, and then think about whether or not their beliefs really mesh with yours. I mean, are they having a problem paying their mortgage? Are they about to be foreclosed on, or did they get their car repoed? Um, do they have a kid in jail for dealing drugs?
or even if they haven't suffered from all these difficulties, do their concrete policy positions reflect the interest in protecting people that actually are going through those kinds of problems? Like a good example, like recently in the last election was, so Andrew Romanoff, he decides that he's going to run, as a Democratic senator, and he's a Sanders kind of Democrat, he's a progressive, whatever you want to call that, and a progressive like in a not an AOC way, not where you're going to sit there and chastise people for not using the term Latinx, where you're actually, concerned about the military industrial complex, concerned about, the dismantling of the welfare state and the construction of a corporate welfare state. Um, and when he started to get traction, and it really looked like he was going to end up getting the nomination after Hickenlooper pulled out of the presidential side of things, and he had explicitly said publicly, I don't want to be a senator. I'm not going to run as a senator. But the DNC came in and said, we cannot have an Andrew Romanoff type character, And I don't know what Andrew Romanoff's background is, but I do know that his policy positions have always been very sharp and very thoughtful. Like I definitely supported the dude. Um, he got he got thoroughly punished by the Democratic establishment because he did not fit that financial disposition.
They will definitely kill you and your career if you don't like it. I don't know if you guys remember Ben Nighthorse Campbell. He was a senator in Colorado.
For a long ass time, dude.
And for a really long time, he was a Democrat. And then just all of a sudden, certain numbers changed and lines had been redrawn. And all of a sudden, Ben Nighthorse Campbell was a Republican and he got reelected. So again, they're Demopublicans and they don't give a shit about you.
And understand clearly that Ben Nighthorse Campbell, if you listen to the name, and you can say whatever the fuck you want about me in the aftermath of this, but I mean what I'm saying. He checked the boxes. He was indigenous, he was a Native American, but he had a specific financial disposition that he was protecting the spaces of. So
yeah. So I I tried to segue earlier when I mentioned the state rep that was against, or she was pro-life, and that's why I decided I wasn't a Republican.
Okay.
We didn't segue, which is fine. I think that we had a nice conversation. But we're coming up at the bottom of an hour. And I do think that we need to talk about Roe v. Wade, because a couple of things, in my opinion, happened when the Supreme Court said, you know what, the state has all the power. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm a state power guy. I believe that there should be a weaker federal government and the state should have power.
Slow down real quick. Just say that again one more time so that everybody understands what the Roe v. Wade outcome was really based, like what was driving it, what the rhetorical disposition was. Because they weren't making a moral claim. They were making a claim about whether or not the federal government could make determinations with regards to specific policy positions.
Right. And so basically they said, you know what? It's now up to the state in order to come up with that policy. And the federal government is no longer going to protect us using Roe v. Wade. And that's fine. But what happened, in my opinion, is, well, I already told you that now we're probably on our way back to the Stone Age, because certain states like Missouri and Oklahoma, Texas, Mississippi, they are going to make it very difficult for these women to have abortions, even in the case of rape or incest. And, well, that is a problem, being able to tell a woman what to do with her body. That's not the larger problem as I see it. Basically because the Supreme Court was tired of fighting with all of these states that their dockets were being essentially log jammed with cases. The federal government did what a shitty parent would do when the kid keeps asking for something, and they basically just gave up. They threw up their arms and said, fine, you guys can do whatever you want now. And I think that caused a larger problem. One, the states know that if they just keep hounding the federal government, at some point they can win. Or two, they've, well, and not or two, but they've essentially created a scenario where the poor and uneducated people of these states are going to be fucked. So, really, what they've done is they've separated even more the poor from the rich, and the poor people are going to get fucked again.
But even as you say that, like when you say the federal government threw up their hands, like I mean, it was clearly strategic. I mean, to be sure, because these populations were dependent on these federal policies that had been constructed as a way of creating these spaces. I mean, they did. I mean, it's odd how like we're back in this very like peculiar bastardized federalist anti-federalist moment right now, but it had nothing to do with anything, I mean, it's not, the masses this and keep this one in check and blah blah. It's not what Madison and Jefferson and all those guys were talking about back then. It's more of a strategy, like a strategy to where like equal rights positions or Roe v. Wade, they were constructed on a federal level, and now all of a sudden there's this pushback to where, I mean, it's not just a question of saying that the federal government may say it looks like they're just throwing up their hands, but if you're actually positing that the people that are going to be the victims of this choice because they don't have the tools to function on the state level, and they didn't have the tools to function on a federal level either. But there were at least spaces where people were like, we can't do this shit anymore. We have to create these spaces to where people aren't totally getting screwed over by creating something like Roe v. Wade in the first place. But whatever, I digress. I just don't want to leave it in the terms of where it sounds like. When I think about the way that the conservative judgeships were being put in place over the course of the last 4 years, in the previous administration, these were not, and the ways in which conservative, you talked about how local jurisdictions are not battleground places enough, but it's clear that a specific demographic of conservative spaces have utilized these over the course of the last several years to gain control of legislatures on a state level, or to gain control of governorships on a state level, to where these certain logics that would come into line with this reactionary right-wing Christian ethos that creates this space to where you're making it impossible for a person who's a poor person to be able to have a medical procedure, essentially creating a new disposable labor class, which is essentially one of the things that you're suggesting at that point in time. It just seems like it's part of a larger strategy when I see all those other aspects that are in place.
Well, I think that it probably was, but I think that to me and a lot of people, at least at first glance, that's what it looked like. And I do think that, there's a possibility that the federal government wanted to test the waters and say, you know what, just remember, we can come in with the National Guard if we want to. But it's a scary thought because of that separation of class at a federal and state level of the things that can now occur because of this reversal and the fact that it looked like they threw their hands up and said,
that's a fact, Jack. Yeah. You're right about that.
So, I mean, do we really want to see segregation in our schools now because of the reversal of Roe v. Wade? Do we want to see any of the things that can happen? I mean,
and all the LGBTQ plus stuff, marriage rights, all the things that,
voters' rights. I mean, they're already trying to take away minority voters' rights by saying, oh, well, you can't do this because you don't have an ID, and you can't do that because you live here.
Love your democracy, everyone. Love it.
So now they're just going to say, sorry, you're black, you can't vote. We're going back to the 3/5 of man thing. So get 6 of your friends and then one of you can vote.
I'm not advocating for anything when I say this, but it's very odd to me that there aren't more militant responses, because I would be pretty angsty about this. Like when I said I was in the academy, I did a lot of work with. I did this thing, oral history project on this thing called Beyond Chicanismo. We looked at a lot of these sort of like developments with regards to militant groups, and of course, in the 1970s, things were very different in the United States than they are right now. But when you see the state institutions being so aggressive, we live in a post-Snowden world. Julian Assange is going to die in prison unless we do something very radical very quickly to get him out of prison. Not to mention Mumia Abu-Jamal, all the other people who I have an affinity for because of their commitment to,
power to the people,
justice and liberation. But it just seems like with this kind of aggression, like towards all of the institutions that we're supposed to, we hold to, we're so romantically devoted to, but the functioning of them is so fucking out of whack.
Yeah, it absolutely is out of whack. And there was a time in my life where I figured we needed to prepare for revolution, and preparation still may be part of it, but I'm too old and too fat now to actually fight, probably. So
yes, we are both definitely too slow and out of shape to be cultivating any concrete strategic revolutionary positions. So take that, Office of Naval Intelligence, and put that in your pipe and fucking smoke it, motherfuckers.
just so you know, that was a reference to my book release party where an intelligence officer showed up. So don't worry, it wasn't like we were actually inviting you guys to come by.
But because of what we're talking about, we know you're already going to be listening to everything anyway. But since everything that's digital goes to a recording, memorized space anyway, in our post-Snowden world, we know that it's going to be there. So,
So listen to it. And remember, you can call us.
Yeah. What's the phone number again?
720-334.
Roll.
Right on. Roll. You can also hit us on Twitter for the time being, at Short Bus Debate. Instagram is coming soon. We'll be on TikTok too, just to kind of keep you guys updated.
And Facebook, tragically. But you got to do what you got to do in this world.
Yes, indeed. I don't know. Again, I don't want to make the women's rights thing seem tertiary, because it is absolutely important. And I do think that with Roe v. Wade, women and men need to stand up and say, you can't do this. In all of the states where they're trying to, well, really fuck people over. But in the grander scheme of things, it is not as much of a problem as the other problems that are going to occur if we don't do something.
And if you see it functioning in a larger strategic context, you have to, this is chess, we have to understand what's happening, where it's happening, and how it's happening, so that you can, because there are no counter moves unless you see, again, nobody's trivializing anything with regards to that stuff. It's, of course, like it's prima facie obvious. I don't have a fucking right to even offer my. I can talk to my partner about it, and that's a private thing between us. But I got a dick, so whatever. When it comes fucking down to it. But if you don't place things into a larger strategic context, then you cannot create effective ways of combating those things, of creating different visions of how to institutionalize or implement things that would create a response to those, counteract them, and everything would just be purely reactionary at that point in time. And if what I said was even partly true, where you see like the way that the judgeships were put in place, or the ways in which there were these tendencies in the way that certain legal positions were being constructed on a federal level that was undermining a logic that was contrary to a specific group interest that wants to maintain a very specific power logic.
Where'd you go?
I'm right here. I come on. You know, when I'm building to these spaces, sometimes it takes me a second. You have to understand that the way that those federal spaces were being constructed was undermining that logic, and these people are these are not random acts. These are things that are, you know, I'm sorry, like you can hate Steve Bannon all you want, you better fucking listen to the guy because he is a part of a group of people that are thinking about things in a certain way. And the people that you don't like, if every time you listen to them you get irritated by what it is they're saying, I'm telling you not to be motivated. Be motivated by the things you disagree with. But you at least need to disassociate yourself enough with those emotions so that you can see where those logics are being put into place, so that you can see how this counter move spaces are. Otherwise, you know, you're just cannon fodder, you know. And we're running out of time here. We don't have time for the cannon fodder position. So
I agree completely. And well, I've sat around on my ass for the last 10 years and would be really good cannon fodder. I don't want to be anymore. So
I still think you should write a book too, but that's a different discussion for a different day.
Well, I've got a lot of things in writing. None of them are just good enough to publish yet. So I think that we're gonna wrap up this show. Is there something else you want to talk about before we go?
No, I mean I can rattle on like the clatterbone of a goose's ass forever, you know. So we'll just keep coming back and keep coming back and keep coming back. So
Okay, so this was episode 1 of the Short Bus Debate Club with Brian Courtney and Darren Jolly. We're going to try and do 2 or 3 episodes per week, and I don't quite know the release dates yet. I'm thinking Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but we'll let you know more as things come up.
The preliminary operation is going to be very organic at the beginning.
Thanks for letting everybody know.
Fuck yourself very much.
Remember to reach out on Twitter or give us a call at 720-334-ROLL. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Adios. Buenas noches.